Shalom. Hi. Welcome back. Welcome to Jerusalem Insights, another session on thoughts and concepts that come out of the Torah portion, but also come born in Jerusalem. And hopefully through that, you'll all get a taste of Jerusalem, of the sense that we all have here, and will make you yearn to come back because the city waits for its children. And the city, Jerusalem, is the city of Abba, of our Father, and he wants his children to come to visit. So, B'ezrat Hashem, that will happen. I want to focus on this week's Torah portion that's coming, Bamidbar, which is the beginning of the book of what's called in English the Book of Numbers. But Bamidbar, the word Bamidbar means in the wilderness. And what I want to do is focus on what does that have to do with Jerusalem Day, which is happening with God's help this Friday, Thursday night and Friday, and with Shavuot, the day of receiving God's revelation at Mount Sinai. And it's always here. The holiday of the Persian portion of Bamidbar always happens before the festival of Shavuot, and always is just around Jerusalem Day. And that's not coincidence. The book of Bamidbar, the book of wilderness, is a book that really focuses on how do I take a people who came out of Egypt, slaves, unable to believe in themselves in order to change the world. I need to take them through a wilderness. Just something about the wilderness experience that brings out the most challenging and yet the best out of the character of a people. So the book of Bamidbar is the fourth of the 5 books of the Torah. It speaks a lot about challenges, it speaks a lot about great successes, but it really is, as all the Torah portions and all the books in Torah, an eternal guide for a people wanting to become the best that they can, and individuals trying to become the best servant that they can for Hashem. And so the fact that the first Torah portion of Bamidbar is read before Shavuot is not happenstance. Ezra decreed that it would always be read before the festival of Shavuot. So what is it about the wilderness of Shavuot that helps us prepare for the experience we have on Shavuot? The Chidush Arim, one of the Rebbes from Gur, he says that we learned that there's a verse that when the Vayichan Israel, when all the Jewish people camped under Mount Sinai, every man by his own camp, and each man by his own division. That's Numbers 152. What he was saying, Chidush Arim said that this is supposed to teach us that in order to receive an understanding from Hashem, in order to receive an understanding from God, each man and woman must find their place and space in order to understand and really begin to receive. We always try to be like him or like her, when in fact Hashem is saying, just be you. Find your place, and when you find your place, you'll be able to hear me. But in all these things, we learn, the Midrash teaches us, in Bamidbar Rabbah, it teaches us that the wilderness is a place where God speaks loudly. The word for wilderness in Hebrew, midbar, is the same word as medaber, meaning the wilderness speaks to us. There's something about that whole experience that makes us more attuned, more able to listen. And there are several components about a wilderness, why Hashem brought us through that in order to receive the Torah. First of all, it's ownerless. Nobody owns anything in the wilderness. It's this desert. It's this vast area. And in that vast area, in that desert, no one can say, oh, this was only spoken to me. Hashem wanted it made very clear, the Midrash Rabbah says, that this is for the whole world. What I'm speaking about Sinai is meant to impact the whole world. And it's true that for many generations there'll be one people who will hear it, who will adhere to it, who will walk with it, who will be impacted by it. But in the days, Isaiah 11 describes, in the end of days, the knowledge of God will cover the earth like water covers the ocean. Everyone will hear it. Everyone will know what their soul already knows, that somewhere in the universe, in whatever spiritual universe we all are in or were, we know that God spoke and revealed something at Mount Sinai. So first of all, it's ownerless. Second of all, the wilderness teaches us all about humility. Meaning when you're alone in the desert, suddenly you become much more humble. You become much more small. You sit in the wilderness, all you see is the vastness of forever. You see, you look out and you see the stars in the distance. You see the sand in its vastness. That does a lot to make us a little bit smaller. And when we become a little bit smaller, we're ready to hear that much more. King David says, I call out to the hills, from whence shall come my help? I will raise my eyes to the hills. From whence shall come my help? The word from whence is me'ayin yavo, from where will come my help? But it also, ayin means from nothingness. When I become a little bit smaller, then maybe there's room for me to hear God. There's also something else. When you're in the wilderness, everything is highlighted. When there's nothing there, suddenly every little pebble and every single plant and every single ant that comes by suddenly is important. And that's also critical. If you're going to hear, understand, receive Hashem's word, you have to realize that every single pebble, word, letter is critical. But it's also something else. We think of wilderness as a place of difficulty. In fact, even in the book of Hosea, he says, I will make you like a wilderness, dry and out of a sense of judgment. But then he goes on to say, Hosea says in Hosea 2, he says the following. In Parak 2, לכן הנה אנוכי מפתח והלכתי המדבר ודיברתי ליבה. I'm going to allure you, I'm going to entice you, regardless of how far you've gone from me, I'm going to entice you back to the wilderness, because in the wilderness, you'll hear my tender voice. When you're back in that wilderness, you're not the rush, the fears, the concerns about Corona, the world, the economy. Suddenly in the wilderness, you'll be able to hear me again. So Hashem says, I'm going to bring you into wilderness, because then you'll be able to hear that voice that is so tender, that needs to be heard, almost like a still small voice. And those are the things we need to do to be able to receive Hashem's word. So Ezra the scribe, when we returned back into the land, decreed that this Torah portion would be read before Shavuot. But there's another connection. In Yirmiyahu we read the following. הלוך וקראתי באוזני ירושלים לאמור כה אמר השם זכרתי לך חסד נעורייך אהבה כלולותייך לכתך אחריי במדבר בארץ לא זרועה. Meaning, go and proclaim in the ears of Jerusalem, saying, thus says Hashem, I remember concerning to you the devotion of your youth, the love of your betrothals. You're following after me in the wilderness through a land that's not sown. Yirmiyahu is saying that's the time Hashem felt a sense of betrothal. You were ready to go into the wilderness to be with me. So there's something about Yerushalayim, which is what he points to. He doesn't talk about all the people. There's something about Yerushalayim that has to do with that march through history. And it goes all the way back to the beginning of the march of the Jewish people out of the first exile in Egypt. Related back to Yerushalayim. When they stood at the foot of the Red Sea and they sang out to Hashem, they say the following words in Shmot 15, 13 to 17. Exodus 15 to 13, 17. It says, Nachita b'chazdecha amzuk alta nehalta b'ozcha and vekochecha. You and your love have led the people that you've redeemed. You've guided in your strength to your holy habitation. Back then, he's talking about that place in Jerusalem. And he ends at the end saying, and plant them, you will bring them in and plant them in the mountains of your inheritance, the place, O Hashem, which you have made for you to dwell in the sanctuary, Hashem, which your hands have established. Tivi'emo v'tita'emo, you'll plant them. Behar nachlatcha, machon l'shivtecha, pa'at Hashem, migdash Adonai konu yadecha. That place, that house, is going to be that eternal place that was determined and predetermined when they left from Egypt. And in fact, that is the calling card, the thing that has kept us through thousands of years of exile. We say in Tehillim, King David says, "Tzamachti b'omrini beit Hashem lanech b'omdot hayu ragleinu b'sharayich Yerushalayim." I rejoiced when I said, "Let us go to the house of Hashem. Our feet are standing within thy gates." O Jerusalem, that is built as a city, Shechubra le'yachdav, a city reunited together. In 1967, this city, which had been split apart for 19 years, and for 2,000 years Jews were not allowed to flourish, suddenly came back together, just like the prophetic word that David HaMelech said. And that was critical because that whole journey of wilderness the Jewish people had been through went through generations of hatred and persecution, people kicking them from one place to the other or trying to destroy them in every one of those places. The one thing they never forgot was the vow they made. Im eshkachech Yerushalayim tishkach yemini. If I forget you, O Yerushalayim, let my right hand lose its strength. That vow, at the end of every Passover Seder, at the end of every great Simcha, that vow is something that has kept them going for thousands of generations through every type of wilderness, that they would return to Jerusalem. And it doesn't matter, Rome, Inquisition, Holocaust, or anti-Semitic incidents in every corner of the world, throughout that's what brought them back. And in 1967, everything changed. 1967, I was writing a chemistry exam in my junior high school in Montreal, Canada. And in that junior high school, in that junior high, I had brought with me a transistor radio because my whole family were mostly in Israel. And the Jewish people were in complete trauma. The 6-Day War was a war that everyone expected would end completely differently. Everyone expected the next Holocaust. The world told us the next Holocaust was going to happen. The Arabs told us they were all going to throw us into the sea. In Tel Aviv and Haifa, they were digging out mass graves in front of the hospital because they expected the next Holocaust to happen. And in 6 days, God changed that around miraculously. And on June 7th, I was writing a chemistry exam, as I said, smuggled it in transistor radio, and listened while I was writing my exam to a recording. And I don't know if it was recording or live broadcast, but I was listening to a correspondent running with the forces into the old city of Yerushalayim. And in that the correspondent is out of breath. They came into a city, they expected a gigantic battle. Miraculously, the night before, the Jordanian Legion, which was the strongest Arab army at the time, British armed, British trained, the Jordanian Legion had picked up and left the night before. So when the Israelis came in, surprisingly, they found an almost defenseless city. And he's out of breath, and he's saying, where is it? How do I find it? Where do I get to the Western Wall? He goes on to explain, I'm not a religious man. I don't know if I believe in God, but here I am going down the steps of the Western Wall. Here I'm touching the stones of the Western Wall, like my parents and my grandparents always wanted to do. And he begins to sob uncontrollably. And he begins to cry so loudly that he actually takes the microphone away from him and puts it to the side, and he picks up another group of people in prayer. Rabbi Gorin, the chief rabbi of the army, had somehow found himself at the Western Wall at exactly the right time. And he leads a prayer for all the Chayalim, who were very broken and yet excited and exuberant, but broken and sad because they'd lost good friends in the battle leading to the old city. And as he's davening, praying for them, these soldiers who were strong, macho soldiers, were crying like children. And then Rabbi Goren decides to take a small shofar that he had brought from the Nazir's house. He brought a special shofar, and he blows the shofar. So down here at the Western Wall, someone decides to blow a shofar, goes across the radio waves, across the ocean, into my transistor radio in Montreal, Canada, into my ears, into my soul, into my neshama. And that sound of that shofar changed me forever. I knew no matter what would happen, I would become a Jerusalemite. I had no option. I had no possibility of doing anything else. I had to become a Jerusalemite. And thank God, God blessed me with a wife who had that same vision, and children now who all have that same vision. And we were able to fulfill that, coming together after, in the name of all the thousands of years of people in the wilderness and in exile, we came back to Yerushalayim and raised our family, our children, and now our grandchildren, and feeling that there was times we felt when I was in Canada, I was teaching, studying Tanakh, Torah. Suddenly when you're here, you realize something new has changed. Where in the past you were studying Tanakh, the Bible, suddenly you come here and you become it. Jerusalem is that place where everybody who walks through its walls, everybody that comes into here feels, in Israel in a grand scale, but in Jerusalem in a very specialized scale, you feel like you've entered into your Father's house. So this Friday and Thursday night, it won't be the overwhelming, awesome celebrations with tens of thousands of people come with flags and music and singing at the wall because of the corona, because of the situation we're in. But that's not going to change an iota, a little fragment of the joy we'll be feeling. Because that joy is not just our joy. We're carrying with our songs and with our joy and with our words the breath and the spirit and the yearnings of thousands of generations of coming through a wilderness and finally entering into the place that God ordained from the beginning would be his place. So we are going to experience Mount Sinai again. We're going to receive Hashem's Torah the following week. But until then, we're going to experience the joy of thanking Hashem. There's no more awesome thing in the world than gratitude. It's powerful when you want to thank, when you want to ask God for something, when you want to yearn for some type of release. It's more awesome when you can say, Hashem, you know what? All that is true, but thank you. Thank you for bringing us all back. Thank you for creating what you've created. And thank you for fulfilling the promise you made way back then in the wilderness. So all those children who went in the wilderness and followed Hashem, just like he says in Hosea, they all are seeing the beginnings of that fulfillment of prophecy. So this Friday, may we all celebrate, may we all go onto your computers, watch the celebrations wherever they are, and be part of it. Because this is a celebration not just of the Jewish people returning home, it's a celebration of the world coming back into a place of wholeness. The Yerushalayim is a word, is a name that is in the plural form. And why? Because Yerushalayim is really a mixture of the physical and the spiritual. Earthly Jerusalem, heavenly Jerusalem. There are other traditions that have that concept, but for us, earthly and heavenly are already connected, but we don't have the eyes to see it. Hashem is giving us the eyes to see that the physical and the spiritual are all coming together. And once we do that, once we understand how the heavenly and the earthly are really all part of Hashem's plan, then we really will see the peace of Jerusalem. Shalom Yerushalayim. Shalom meaning filled, complete. May we experience that. May we rejoice in that. And Bezrat Hashem, may we all be able to come back to Yerushalayim, enter the city walls, singing and dancing. So Chag Sameach for this Friday holiday. Shabbat Shalom. And Shavuot will speak again next week. Thank you for listening. Litraut.